I've just come from reviewing my own channel and removing some of the old scrub, some of the old undergrowth, just because it was in the way. What I noticed is, well, if I may celebrate myself just a little, I noticed a transition, actually not a transition, but two phases where I was still stuck in the mode of gender identity, and then when I was not, much later, of course, down the track when I was not, and how I'm much more at ease with myself now that I am not, as compared to before. Because before I was stuck in a mode that is, it's pretty much the same as a situation. If you're in the court of the king or the queen, you behave very much according to a prescription, not what you feel, not what you like, but according to a designated identity and range of movements. You can do this, you can't do that. It's very stiff and very, very formal. But, insofar as the old colonial society had inherited the old aristocratic modes and moods, I was stuck in that. I didn't do it very well. I noticed I didn't do that very well. I've never done that very well. I've never been able to have that deftness with applying lipstick in particular, because it never really worked for me. I knew it didn't work for me. I knew it, but I thought, well, temporarily this might, and yet I don't think it did, according to the video. No, I don't really think that was working working for me. But it was a compliance. It was what people don't understand. It's because the system nowadays is totally governed by the logic of narcissism and the sense that nobody falls outside of that logic, that basic construct, that's now called human nature. But what people don't get is, it can. Some things that people do, some things that people comply with are nothing to do with trying to aggrandize themselves or make themselves sort of superior or get a reaction. That was always my contention, in fact, that I was never doing that. I was just complying with what I assumed to have been a formal demand on me, like in the court of a king. Dress like this, sit like that, don't say this and do say that. That was really the restrictions that I imposed on myself, but not because I was in any way, of course. Not, I really wasn't. I mean, a big mistake to think so. I was not in any way masochistic, because masochism means you chose it. But if you're brought up in a very formal, regulated system, you don't choose it, you get it imposed on you, and then you internalize that for fear of punishment, or even to some degree, a fear of death. You impose it on yourself because that's the system, not because that's a way to big note yourself, or to make yourself better known, or to have a greater impact, or to draw attention to yourself, or whatsoever. And that was always the contention I had with people in modernity. I'm not doing this because I want to. I'm doing this because, so far as I know, and I can't really get out of that mindset, that's the only choice. That's, I don't have a choice, in other words. It's the only thing that I can do so as not to be punished. And it's my reflex now. It's my habitual reaction to try to comply with those limits that have been placed on me in the past, so that I don't arouse ire or condemnation or abuse or vengefulness or aggression, or somebody who wants to rob me of my life, or my life, not just maybe my well-being. So looking back, that's what I see. I see somebody, it's funny, it's okay, trying to comply, but for no reason, not for benefits, in other words, but just to do what's socially conditioned, do what's internalized. And the good news is that I suppose people can change, because now I'm not doing what had been internalized. Now I've moved beyond that. Um, I could make big points here about how much effort that took in the different different mechanisms and means and strategies and so on. But you've got access to some of those musings anyway. But you know, this is why you can't, if you're stuck in a identity, why you can't communicate beyond sort of, it's like limits. It's like when you play netball, you stop here, you can't go beyond that limit because you'll be penalized. It's why you can't do it. And then people say, well, you're not doing it because you're aggrandizing, or you're you know, masochistic, or sort of like the opposite of aggrandizing, I suppose, or in some respects it's like the yin and the yang. You're doing sort of a masochistic aggrandizement, and you're drawing us in, or you're aggrandizing and you're pushing us out. You know, it's the whole reasoning of narcissism. We in modernity can't escape it. So we're stuck in a different paradigm. Oh, goodness. Goodness gracious me. And when I say that, of course, I'm not being delicate. I am being very, very ironic about myself. I'm making a self-reference that is humorous. It's ironic. It's funny. It's supposed to be dryly humorous. Very dry. If you can get into dry humor, you'll understand a great deal about many aspects of Asian culture, and many aspects of traditional culture, because they seem to be so serious, but if you look deeper, it's not seriousness at all. It's very dry, self-referential humor. And it's not because it is self-referential, it is not necessarily, and it is actually categorically, I will say, not narcissistic. It's categorically not narcissistic. This is a kind of video ramble. I feel good these days, so I'm happy with I can see through the YouTube development that it has actually been one. Not that it has been as a result of YouTube by any means, but over time one knows more than one does, and one can change and be more who one is, and that's a better thing. And for me, it was getting out of the gender mold, and that wasn't easy. That was a real struggle, because insofar as I was in that gender mold, I had no say over my own life. I was restricted to courtly etiquette, courtly behavior, which is, believe me, a restriction indeed. Just one more note, one final reflection, for whatever purpose. I'm not sure what it may serve, but reflecting back, way back into the past, and how I conceptualized healthy behavior. I realized, if you're dealing with computers, let's say you're dealing with a computer, and they understand identity, identity is X. Let's say they're dealing with it mathematically. Identity is X. Therefore, X is non-equivalent to Y and non-equivalent to Z. That's where I developed my notion of shamanic doubling, because I said, well, okay, fine, X is non-equivalent to these other alphabetical letters, but let's conceptualize anyway a doubling. Let's conceptualize X plus 1, X plus 2, X plus 3 as a kind of doubling. Not that it is, but it's a way to come to terms with a sense of not being X anymore, not being self-equivalent, but being different from X. And that's what we are as we move through time, from infancy to old age. We're not self-equivalent, but I think, and I actually know that a narcissistic society has a lot of trouble, uh, even in its modes of convention nowadays, in conceptualizing change. So let's say it's x plus 1, x plus 2, x plus 3, and that's a kind of doubling. It's not you're not the same as you are. You're relating to yourself, let's say, in a different time frame, and you're moving into that time frame. And as you move into the new time frame, you relinquish the old time frame, and that's what gives you a kind of doubled essence. So for a narcissistic mind, you can understand change in that way. Maybe it's difficult to understand transition and mutation, but you can understand doubling. Uh, so when I was way back thinking about my PhD and how to conceptualize change to people who were resistant to embracing a notion of historical or psychological or change in terms of maturation. So I said it this way, as if speaking to computers. My mind is often oriented in an engineering mode. How do I speak to this kind of a structure in a probably more mechanized way rather than organic way? How do I get that notion to be implanted? Similarly, and here's another big one, people resistant to irony. Irony is a mode of speaking where you don't really say what you mean, or you don't say what people expect you to mean. I think that's probably closer even to irony. You say, you know what people expect you to mean, and then you say something else other than what is anticipated, what is normal, what's expected. And that has an impact, psychological and aesthetic. So I realize people don't get irony. When you are ironic about yourself, they think you're just being naive, or you're confessional in a very childlike, really pathetic way. And they can't see the ironic aspect. And once again, it's an issue of doubling. You need a double consciousness. You need to say, well, I perceive, I think a healthy person tends to say, I perceive what the logical or predictable or conventional, more than that, the conventional outcome would be if somebody did this or said that, but I perceive a different result. That's the irony. That's the funny aspect of it. But you need to be able to conceptually double. It's very sophisticated, I guess, because people don't seem to do it these days. They don't pick up on irony. When I use an ironic tone, they think, oh, she's being, maybe they think, often they think she's being pathetic. She's confessing too much. She's, I don't know, just in this singular or very one-track mindset, and her perspectives are limited. But believe me, when I use irony, I am not limiting myself to one perception or one perspective. I am expecting the double-track mind. I am expecting that people would be able to say, well, if that were so, it's kind of a reductio ad absurdum. I love that logical structure. To reduce something to absurdity shows that the initial premise is invalid. So I love that. That's irony to me. You show that if I really believed that I was, a stupid fellow, a stupid human being, then I wouldn't even be saying that on paper. And so I can't necessarily be admitting to that. You need to make that leap and say, well, she's not really admitting to that degree of naivety. She's making a critique of other people's naivety in being susceptible to thinking that she is that naive. So you got to do, it's not really gymnastics even, it's just a sense of slightly more complex reasoning about things to say, well, if she's, there's a double take, well, if I said, well, I'm just a kindergarten student trying to learn to build bricks, and I can't really recall what the different colors are still. If I said that, and I seemed like really sincere on one level and really believing in it and really appealing to your emotion on one level, a sophisticated mind would say, well, no, she isn't. She knows exactly what she's doing. It's not a manipulation. It's not a trick. She's not trying to trick us that she's just a kindergarten student, because she herself is actually sophisticated and knows what she is and what she isn't. So obviously she's trying to get us to understand that there's a level of misperception about something. It could be anything. It could be childishness, a misperception about that, or once again, innocence, a misperception on that. But in any case, we do need to work for a double vision on that original perception, and basically understand the meaning behind the misrepresentation of a perception. Whether it's a social criticism or it could be a self-criticism, it's a misrepresentation, at least to some degree. It can't be wholly true, otherwise we're all very gullible, very naive, and far too childish. Must be something different from what it appears totally on the surface of reality. Has to be. And so then you enter another level of sophistication. Then finally you get the punchline, you get the joke. You see, I see what she was saying, that people are making out that she's childish. They're making out that she's an idiot, and she knows what's going on, and now we do as well. None of us are idiots anymore because we understand the joke. That's irony for you. If you don't understand the joke, you're on the outside of the joke. You're still, oh, she's in a confessional mode. She thinks she's a baby. She doesn't know bricks. She's a child. You're still trying to, or maybe not trying to, you're maybe not trying to work it out at all, but evading the double meaning, the double entendre, and falling for a ruse and becoming gullible. But those traps are never actually set for anybody. They are traps that people fall into. If you get my drift, I don't set traps for narcissists. I try to appeal to sophisticated people using ironic means. And I do expect people to understand change and history. If they can't understand it, I'll explain it to them as a doubling. When I was a child, I was so crying and so inquisitive and so seeking experience and independence, and now I'm an adult. I do another format. I did ABC, then I did XYZ. I'm doing XYZ now, or Z if you prefer Z, and that's, you need to understand that as a kind of doubling, a movement in a way, but also a sort of parallel between me as I was then and me as I am now. And if you understand dialectics, it's actually a movement between the two things, between ABC and then up to XYZ. As humans transition into a new mode of being, you can conceptualize that as a doubling if that helps you.